Hello, everyone. Hi there. Well, thank you for joining us today. I'm Kate Still, Head of Farming at the Soil Association. So I hope you're all warm on this very chilly day and going to join us for this lunchtime session, because we're really excited to share with you this programme of work that we've been developing under this title of Live Well Positive, Livestock Positive Welfare, where we're really looking at how to set out the opportunities for a good life and what that looks like for farm animals, so that we can make sure that we're delivering as many of those enjoyable experiences to them as we possibly can. Today we're focusing on beef cattle and sheep, but you'll understand in a minute that we're looking at all of the other main farm animal species as well. So today I'm joined by some fabulous animal welfare researchers and scientists who are working with me on this whole programme. So we've got Siobhan Mullan from University of Dublin, Alison who works for me at Soil Association, Lizzie Rowe, who works for all sorts of different people, but is also works for herself, and Rayner from Planton Farm, who also works for all sorts of different people. So yeah, it's a fabulous team that we've gathered to sort of develop this work, and you've obviously been working on it for some time. So the plan is, I can move to my next little slide. The plan is that Siobhan is going to set out the sort of concepts for positive welfare and the good life frameworks. And then Lizzie and Alison are going to dig in a little bit deeper to some of the different opportunities within the frameworks of beef, cattle and sheep, to give you more of a flavour of how they work and how they're set out. And then Annie's going to have a bit of a chat through some of our thoughts on how the frameworks could be used, and yeah, get a bit of your feedback as well in terms of how you think the frameworks could be used and applied, obviously for the benefit of the animals, but also for the benefit of farmers, stakeholders, policymakers, all of those other groups as well. We'll have some time at the end for Q&A, but so please use the question and answer function on your little panel thing to post your questions. There is also a chat, and we will, be monitoring that as well. But if you can, encourage you to use the Q&A to put your questions in, we will get to them at the end. But firstly, I just wanted to take a second to be able to really kick off on why the Soil Association is sort of at the heart of this work, and why we are leading on it. And fundamentally, really, it's because improving animal welfare is really, really important to us as a charity, as an organisation, as an organic scheme. And one of our strategic aims really is to strive for a good life for all farmed animals. A key way we do this is really looking at developing our own organic standards and making sure that they are as good and robust as they can be in terms of delivering good life for farm animals. Obviously, we work a lot as well within our policy team to identify different areas, particularly around antibiotic use, but other areas. And another key piece of work that we've been involved with is the development of welfare outcome assessment on farm under the lengthy Assurewell project that we were working with, obviously Siobhan at Bristol, and also RSPCA, in developing those welfare outcome measures that enable farm assurance schemes to robustly assess and make sure that basically the system management environment is really meeting the needs of those individual animals. But when we were developing the Assurewell approach, we were really conscious that we were still focusing on these absence of harm measures, which obviously are incredibly important, but there's this big gap around wanting to also measure the opportunities for animals to do all of the sort of positive behaviours that we would like them to be able to do in the system, whether that's rooting, playing, access to the outside, all of these sorts of positive areas. And we were struggling at being able to identify robust measures that could capture a lot of this. So hence why we've been looking at these good life frameworks, where you can look at setting out all of the things that they do like and enjoy, and see if you can set up systems that provide all of these different opportunities, and also identify different systems that very much have ceilings on these opportunities. So I won't go very much detail into the actual frameworks, but I just wanted to highlight, why Soil Association were keen to develop this approach. And a big part of it really is about being able to celebrate and demonstrate where farmers are going above and beyond sort of minimum standards, and enabling them to have a scientifically validated language that they can use to, you know, highlight all of the different opportunities they're delivering. So the way we're being able to deliver this work is partly through our Farm to Fork partnership with Ocado Retail, and we have the opportunity to develop the academic frameworks for both beef cattle and sheep, but also dairy laying hens, chickens and pigs, and to pilot widely the frameworks, engage, consult with farmers and stakeholders, and not just develop the frameworks themselves, but create opportunities for their impact and adoption, you know, widely. So that's what we're starting to do, obviously, as part of some of the pilot work we've been doing, and this webinar is obviously one way of engaging everybody. And secondly, we're developing and piloting and consulting specifically on the beef, cattle and sheep frameworks as part of a project for Welsh Government. Continuous improvement is part of the Welsh Government's animal welfare plan, and promoting that animals have a good quality of life is a strategic priority of the Welsh Animal Health and Welfare Framework. Therefore, we're looking at how we could use the frameworks as an approach to identify where opportunities are widely provided and areas where there's need for you know, more investment. It's more difficult for farmers to deliver these opportunities, and then see how they can be developed into forming these positive welfare solutions that potentially could be an offering under the Sustainable Farming Scheme. So this project is key at really sort of identifying where there are, you know, areas of opportunity for investment, and also obviously, again, celebrating and highlighting where farmers are already sort of meeting all of these great opportunities. So those are the two key projects that we're working with to develop this work. And I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. So I will now shush and hand over to Siobhan, who is going to go into a bit more detail about the frameworks.
Thanks, Kate. So, yeah, I thought I'd maybe go right back to the beginning and take you on the journey that I guess, you know, all of us, and particularly welfare science, has been on over the last kind of 40 years. It's quite a young science. I guess it kind of evolved out of what would have previously just been called animal science. And the focus at the beginning was very much on those negative states, so things like sheep lameness or very restrictive systems. And even at the beginning, it was necessary to demonstrate that they were a problem for animals. So once that was starting to be established, then the focus shifted a little bit to what were the risk factors for those various problems that were then identified. And from that, I think then there was a growing realization that whilst really critically important, of course, it's not giving the whole picture, mirroring perhaps also a kind of greater interest in human psychology as well, in positive experiences and what positive emotions bring to the overall picture. So we started to then look really probably only in the last 10 years or so in any great kind of depth or scale at positive experiences for animals and what that might mean. So the concept of the good life was really in a way born out of the Fork report in 2009, and it, you know, it could have been characterized in a number of ways, but this is the way they decided to portray it. So they suggested that welfare is a continuum from poor to good, and that at one end of the spectrum you have a life that isn't worth living, and in fact at that point your quality of life is unacceptable, and in effect you're better off being dead. Then you move up to having overall a life worth living, and then beyond that a good life. And they very much set out that the aspiration should be for a good life. They, I guess, highlighted where they thought the kind of minimum acceptable standards should be, which was around that at least having a life worth living. But they were very clear to say that the direction of travel should absolutely be towards a good life and ensuring that more and more animals, particularly farmed animals within their remit, were able to experience a good life. And I thought it was just worth touching on why positive feelings might even exist in the first place. I think it's easy to understand sometimes the evolutionary drive of negative feelings, so fear and so on, highlighting those dangerous situations that are worth avoiding for kind of life and death moments. But I really like this quote from two very prominent researchers of human happiness, because they suggest that as pleasure can be thought of as evolution's boldest trick, serving to motivate an individual to pursue rewards necessary for fitness, they remind us that pleasure really is there as well as the dual yin and yang, if you like, well, working together in tandem with those negative experiences. So in the case of the photo that we're seeing there, the fact that cattle and many other animals have evolved to be able to taste lots and lots of different types of tastes and foods and differentiate between different plants has helped them over millennia, over evolutionarily timeframes, to pick out and chase and seek out those foods which have been most useful to them. And so we have started, as I said, to look more and more about positive experiences for animals. And I suppose the first things that people started to do, which of course farmers will have been doing for a very long time, is start to look at what animals actually do and what they choose to do in environments when they've got lots of different opportunities, and how they prefer to spend their time, both kind of physically and socially. And then we've been on a search for specific indicators of pleasure, and probably we can all imagine the animals that we deal with showing some of those indicators in certain situations, but they haven't been as easy to identify and isolate scientifically, I suppose, as perhaps we might have hoped initially. So research is very much ongoing in the area of these specific indicators, but we've mapped a lot of that type of observational research onto the research that's been coming out of a more controlled laboratory type settings, particularly human psychology experiments and animals in similar settings within laboratories. So looking at brain imaging and other very controlled experiments around positive experiences. And then we're able to also, where appropriate, extrapolate from some of the principles of human experiences and what positive emotions mean to us, and how we integrate that into the ideas around a good life and overall well-being. So just thinking about what positive experiences contribute to overall welfare. Well, I think in humans it's becoming clear that they're critically important in many studies when they ask people about their well-being and what are the sort of things that influence it in lots of ways. So here's a nice quote that sums it up. People experience abundant well-being when they feel many pleasant and few unpleasant emotions, when they're engaged in interesting activities, when they experience many pleasures and few pains, and when they are satisfied with their lives. And I think that starts to really sum up the idea that we're taking all of this into the round, but these many pleasant and many pleasures are quite important. And different human colleagues working in the field of human happiness have gone further to suggest that overall well-being is not simply a lack of negative states, but even may predominantly depend upon positive experiences when they are dealing with humans. And I think it's worth noting that there have been a number of different types of studies that have tried to look at how we achieve this balance. What does it mean about what is the correct ratio? And in humans anyway, it seems that there's at least some evidence, although it's individually variable, that a 1-to-1 ratio of positive to negative experiences actually doesn't leave us in a particularly good state. And you start to need a definite kind of overload of positive experiences to feel okay or even happy. So we sort of took all of that background work and started to think about how we could, I guess, be a little bit clearer about what it is that is really delivering positive experiences and a good life for animals. So under the Assure Well project, which Kate mentioned, we were already doing these negative welfare measures, but we wanted to have that kind of corollary balance there. So we started developing these good life frameworks. We just came up with a kind of, this idea building on that continuum of the Fork report, and thought about having 3 different levels which sit above the legislation and codes of practice. We started working from the kind of top level backwards, if you like. So for each particular area, we thought to ourselves, okay, we're going to take the product, whether it's eggs, milk, or killing some of the animals, but what would it look like if this animal was really in a kind of a farmed animal utopia? And then we worked backwards to find these steps. And we went, first of all, to look in the scientific literature and also speaking to farmers. And we took the 4 domains that were present in the Fork report, which is comfort, pleasure, interest, and confidence. Those are the 4 areas they suggested positive experiences fell under. And we added in a 5th one around healthy life. And we built these up really focusing on the idea of choice, because you can then cope with that individual variation in that we know that from many studies that animals don't always choose the same things, and that also either between animals or also at different times of day or in different situations, they might be likely to choose different things. And we did this for the major farmed animal species. And so, as I said, we really focused on the literature for this. So as much as possible, we built up these different domains with the evidence from the literature, but then also including stakeholder input. So, for example, series of focus groups with farmers, working with farm assurance assessors and so on. And we divided up those comfort, pleasure, confidence, interest, and healthy life into different kind of subcategories, and then use those as appropriate for each species. And moving up the tiers, essentially the animals had in general maybe more choice, more of the things that we know animals tend to choose, and also bringing in that idea of kind of monitoring and making sure that they really are actually benefiting from the resources that are available. And we published this work, which was kind of theoretical initially, and then also included kind of field trials and studies and so on as well. And for example, as Kate mentioned earlier, one of the things we were interested in was understanding whether farmers really were providing these things for animals, but kind of to an unknown degree. And on a study of around 50 cage-free hen farms, we found that 28% of the time farmers were going above and beyond the requirements of their scheme. So already we know that the standards were going above and beyond legislation, but there was this whole group of farmers who were delivering more for the animals that but effectively we're not getting any recognition or reward for. So we really hope that this could be a mechanism to promote the good things that they were doing. And finally, I'm just going to highlight that the positive welfare has gone mainstream now, if you like. So it's really prominent in the welfare strategies that have been published for sheep and cattle. There's now a really nice kind of consensus definition of it in the literature, the scientific literature, and the BVA are kind of also very much behind it and promoting it. So I think we've come on a long journey. We've still got further to go, which is why we're here and embarking on these initiatives. But we're excited about it and looking forward to seeing the progress continue.
Great, thanks, Siobhan. I can take over a little bit from here now and talk about the next steps that we've done to bring this forward. And part of the project that we're doing, I work with Kate and the Soil Association on the Live Well project, is to bring that scientific knowledge and the scientific papers and bring them into an accessible format that a summary that industry can use to think about in an easy way. And so we've produced handbooks for starting with beef, cattle and sheep that explain a bit about the frameworks, that contain the criteria and a bit of the scientific reasoning behind it. So for each of those domains Siobhan talked about, comfort, pleasure, interest, confidence and a healthy life, there is a page within the book that explains the criteria within the framework, moving up through 3 tiers to that ideal farmed environment. And we also then have a section of containing the scientific background from the literature about those important aspects, explain why some of those criteria are in there around the cattle behavioural welfare. So these books, by the time we look through every component, are quite long, and so we don't have time to go through every part of the framework today. So I'm just going to take a couple of examples, and I shall do it for beef cattle, and my colleague Lizzie will do that for sheep in a moment, just to give you a flavour of what's in them and the type of things that we're looking at. So quite topical, I think, for the last couple of days is thermal comfort. And we all have probably experienced in the last couple of days that thermal comfort is important to our well-being, and that's no different from cattle as well. And so within our frameworks, we look at that, starting, and again, I'd just like to emphasise that Tier 1 should be above and beyond legislation and codes of practice. So, this is a good tier where farmers are already providing more than they need to. Looking at that choice of within housing, choice of temperature that animals can move into or out of areas of, particularly say in cattle shed housing, areas of wind or rain, or choose to stand in the breeze in the summer if they're in warm housing at that point. And so we'd look that there was at least some provision of that within their housing, and that they also have an access to an outdoor loafing area at least, which adds a little bit extra in terms of their thermal comfort. If they are outside and at pasture, great. But there should be access to shade and shelter. It's really important for cattle that they have a dry lying area, and so that's something that should be looked at to make sure that provision is there for them. Shelter is really important to prevent that wind chill effect, and cattle will avoid look to escape high wind speeds, especially if their coat is wet in rain, because that accentuates that wind chill effect. Looking looking at the types of temperatures, depending on, for cattle, depends on a few different factors, breed, coat, body condition, etc. But you can start to see cold stress starting to occur for anything from 0 degrees in bad weather, so that's wind and rain combined, although they can withstand much lower temperatures down to -10, -20 for some breeds if they are in dry conditions. Looking at the other end of the spectrum and thinking back to the summer when we had a very hot, dry spell, shade is also equally as important in those conditions, and cattle have a natural behaviour to go and seek shelter or shade when they need to maintain their body temperature. And so we look through the tiers. In the second tier, that with providing more choice and a greater range of shelter types and shade intensities. That could be hedges, trees, walls, anything that they can use for that shade and shelter. Then moving up to the ideal would be just providing even more. So the more shade and shelter that you can provide to the cattle, the more they will use it. And looking at provide a provision of roughly 4 meters squared per cow, you'll find that some will use it, and that's fine. However, if you can provide, the studies show, up to 8 or 9 meters squared, then you'll find that cattle will use it simultaneously, and there'll be less aggressive interactions between them. They can choose who to lie next to. Subordinate animals can avoid dominant animals, and which makes the social herd environment easier for them as well. And so, looking into, you can look into silver pastoral systems as well, which provides a form of diverse vegetation that they can eat whilst they're in their shade and shelter. We are then looking at that ideal situation. I'm going to run a little poll here to think, if you have your own farm, obviously your own situation, or if you don't have a farm, if you can think of the last farm you went to, which tier do you think that your farm would fit into? And if you could just, there should be a poll come up now, and if you could just click whether you think that your farm would fall into tier 1, 2 or 3. It would just be interesting just to get a little gauge of that. Thanks. I'll move on to interest now. So having an interesting and a diverse environment is, something that we provides those positive experiences in life. And for cattle, they are a curious species, and that curiosity comes from that need to roam, to forage, to find new foods, to select new foods, to select different types of food according to what they need at the time. And so providing that outdoor access is something that is quite important for interest. It provides a much more complex environment. And so we find that access to pasture is part of the framework for looking at interest for cattle. It's thinking about what interest can invite. If they're in an indoor environment, at least providing one item for exploration or investigation, even could be as simple as a cardboard box or a hay ball or a hanging toy or something. When they're outside, it's also important to think about the environment outside. It's interesting. A simple paddock with a stock wire fencing and a mono ryegrass might not actually be that interesting, although it will have elements of different, say, wind speeds and sunshine, etc. It still might not be that interesting in terms of investigating and exploring behaviours to cattle. And so you look at providing hedges, trees, natural features of rocks, and also a diverse vegetation in the pasture means they can go and investigate and find different things to eat. And so we'll find that those build access to different types of enrichments or more diverse environment and natural features, builds as we go up through the tiers and to the top where you've got something that's very interesting that each individual can choose to do. One further aspect that is included within this is thinking about cattle grooming behaviour. So cattle are highly motivated to keep their coats clean. It's a natural behaviour that they'll use trees and branches and anything outside as scratching posts or grooming posts. And so this does start to look at that, highlight that access to something indoors as well. So this is more widespread within the dairy industry. Access to cattle brushes within dairy cattle housing now is well talked about. But something that is raised now within the beef cattle framework, that as a cattle species who have that natural behaviour to want to keep their coats clean, that they have access to a grooming object within their housing as well. I believe the poll was running during that, so that's great. We can get a feeling of where those farms sit. So that's all we've got time for beef. So I'm going to pass on to Lizzie, and she's going to take a couple of examples from the sheep framework to go through.
Sorry to interrupt, Alison. I think we just need to do our interest poll first. So
oh, sorry.
That's all right. So if people can complete the poll, and then I'm hoping, can you see the responses, Alison, once it goes through?
No,
you can't. Okay. Well, we'll just get a few people to just to fill in, and then yeah, because we didn't get a chance to reflect on the thermal comfort poll to see that actually there was quite a nice spread of people. But yeah, I think unfortunately you can't see it, which is a flaw.
Here we have interest.
Here we go. Can you see that
here
now?
We go. So we have majority here. So we've got 59% on tier 2, so that's our main one. Yeah, so that is really good, and yeah, and nearly 20% achieving tier 3 as well. So we've got 60, 70, 78, 79% achieving either tier 2 or 3. So that's excellent. I'm quite impressed with that. And yeah, and even 3% achieving tier 1, achieving above and beyond. So that's brilliant.
I think those results were very similar to comfort. Oh, here we go. Comfort's back up now.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yes, they are very similar. That's great. I think, and this is, it's quite a good chance to highlight that a lot of this stuff is stuff that these experiences and opportunities are actually being provided. This is about acknowledging where those things are being provided in our farming systems already. And for beef, cattle and sheep, I think we could be quite strong on some of this. And so this is meant as a good news story as well for the farming industry. And we hope that it will support the industry in this project. Lizzie, shall we move on to sheep?
Thank you so much, Alison. So we'll move on to sheep. We have a handbook for sheep, and I've put in the chat some people interested in having access to the handbook. We've piloted these as drafts, and now we've just got a few little tweaks to make to them. But as soon as they're ready, which they will be very soon, we'll send them out to everyone who's attended today and anyone else who might be interested. So thinking about sheep and a couple of examples from the framework. If we start with pleasure from food enrichment. So finding pleasure from food is about more than just nutrition. It's about providing variety in the diet. So this gives the opportunity for different tastes and textures, but it also introduces choice into an animal's life, which, as Siobhan has already said, is a really important aspect of positive welfare and allows animals to express their individual preferences, but also to have kind of control and autonomy over their lives, which research has indicated is related to positive mental states. But also finding pleasure from food is related to giving animals the opportunities to express their natural foraging behaviours. And these are intrinsically rewarding behaviours, driven by pleasure to get to these fitness-inducing opportunities, as Siobhan already touched on. So for sheep, this is grazing, but also browsing. And just as a reminder, that Siobhan already said, moving up the tiers, it's all about giving animals more choice, but also a greater amount of the things that they like, and then also more of the things that they prefer. So you'll see this reflected in the tiers for food enrichment for sheep. So as we move up from 1+, we've got at least some food delivered in a way that encourages this natural grazing behaviour. So if sheep are housed, they at least have access to things like hay and straw to be able to perform some grazing behaviour, but also possibly access to grass. And then we also have sheep being able to eat at the same time. So sheep show behavioural synchronicity in their feeding behaviour. It's something they like to perform together. And this is now taken as a kind of indicator of positive welfare. That's, yeah, the sheep are able to act cohesively as a flock and do things that they like doing together. Moving up to 2+, this is this concept of introducing even more choice and variety into their diet. So they're given a varied diet with more than one type of food. So this may be conserved forage that has a diversity of species in it, or they're given tree hay inside. But then also 2+ introduces this having access to the outdoors, where they're given a choice of pasture vegetation. So again, like Alison was saying with cattle, not just having a monoculture of grass, but having different species within the pasture that they can seek out, and gives them this variety of different tastes and gaining pleasure from that. And then moving up to 3+, again, more choice. So if they're ever housed, they're given even more variety in their diet. But ultimately outdoors, they're also given access to perform their natural browsing behaviour. So they don't just graze, but they will take opportunities to browse and to access, if they have access to hedges and trees. And again, this gives even more choice in their diet. And research shows that sheep are quite good at self-medicating, so choosing things that they want to improve their own health, but also they do show, there's been research to show that they do follow their own individual preferences and select for different things in their diets, whilst meeting their own nutritional needs, which may also vary from sheep to sheep. So yeah, this choice is really important. And then finally, monitoring what they're eating, what they like, offering more of what they like, and doing things like offering new things to see if they might like those too. So that's kind of an overview of pleasure from food enrichment. And then I thought I'd move on to healthy life, which is this new, I say new, so a kind of extra positive welfare opportunity that we added above and beyond the 4 opportunities outlined by Fork. And the reason for this was that positive welfare relates both to brief, so short-term positive experiences. So when we think about something like pleasure, it may be quite a short-lived state, mental positive state, which is really important. These positive experiences are all really important, but it also includes this kind of idea of long-term well-being. So like longer states of positive well-being, and positive health is part of this idea of longer term well-being. So it's referring, a healthy life isn't just in the absence of disease. It's feeling well, feeling vigorous, and also being resilient. So managing for positive health refers to promoting an animal's ability to function well, so to thrive, focusing on proactive interventions that promote health and resilience. This idea being that a resilient animal can adapt to its environment and maintain or restore its good health. And resilience is now a proposed indicator of positive welfare, included in this consensus definition that Siobhan highlighted, on what goes into positive welfare and all these different facets. So yeah, as I said, this whole idea of healthy life through management policy is all about proactive interventions to promote health. So I've also just realised that I didn't do my poll halfway through healthy life. I'll finish this one and then we'll go back to the poll for food enrichment, and then I've just got one more bit to touch on for healthy life. But for 1+, so it's all about setting out a proactive plan, developed with veterinary advice and reviewing it regularly, acting immediately on any variation in from normal behaviour, also having training on giving medication and humane culling, and pain relief as well as part of the management of unwell animals, which we understand is difficult for sheep. There are no licensed pain relief medication for sheep, but I think this is why it's important. One of the reasons, this framework is important is highlighting where things could things need changing in the system, and it's part of the kind of consultation process with stakeholders and farmers that we're going through to highlight things like this that on principle should be included in the framework but may be harder to meet in reality. And then 2+, having regular dialogue with a vet or welfare advisors, procedures in place to keep animals healthy whilst giving them other opportunities like interest and pleasure through outdoor access, making sure we're keeping them safe from disease and predation at the same time. And then also carrying out welfare outcome monitoring in addition to kind of routine daily inspections, and using those welfare outcome data to adjust resources and management accordingly to improve health and welfare. So it's all this proactive approach. And then 3+, farm staff take part in welfare activities with wider benefits. So this may be being part of peer-to-peer discussion groups, being on groups for scheme policy or management, and taking part in on-farm welfare research, so getting involved in research like this. So now I'm going to go back to our slides for pleasure through food enrichment. And yeah, again, like Alison said, thinking about your farm or a farm that you were last on, where do you think, what do you think you would meet in terms of the tiers? We can share the results when they're ready. I wonder if they'll be similar. Ah, interesting. Okay, so we've got more farms meeting 3+ than we did for the beef cattle for the other opportunities, which is amazing. Yeah, quite an even split. So again, like Alison said, it really is a good news story to show that there are farms and farmers out there going above and beyond in this way, and even meeting our farmed animal utopia that we're outlining in these frameworks. So that's absolutely excellent. Thank you so much. And I'm running slightly over, so I'm going to really quickly just touch on a healthy life through breeding for positive welfare. So this is all about thinking about this longer term well-being through breeding choices, selecting the right breeds and traits to ensure a healthy life through positive well-being and resilience. So as we know, historically, farm animals have been selectively bred, largely focusing on production parameters, which often is negatively correlated with welfare. So if we can breed addressing these key health and welfare issues, then we're able to promote positive welfare even further. So examples might be selecting sheep for less reactive temperaments, so to improve houndability in the human-animal relationship, improving maternal care and easier birthing, and also ensuring the suitability of the breed to the land and system, so perhaps breeding for hardier breeds that are able to live happily and thrive in more sustainable systems. Yes. So this, the tiers outline for 1+, recognizing the undesirable side effects of selection for production parameters, and making choices to reduce these issues. So perhaps breeding to reduce lameness within the flock. Going up to 2+, it's more about thinking about future flock health and welfare in the long term, and making breeding choices according to welfare and valuing this equally to production parameters. And if the sheep aren't being bred by the farmers, the farm managers themselves, then feedback is given to those who are in charge of breeding on which traits are important. And then finally for 3+, it's all about making breeding choices, valuing long-term improvement of health and welfare, resilience and metabolic normality, are above and beyond production parameters, including the suitability to a particular type of land and system. So having sheep that are thriving in these positive environments that we're putting them in. And that's it from me. I'm going to pass over to Annie now to talk about the use of these frameworks.
Hi, thanks. If I just skip on. So as Kate says, we're part of this kind of Welsh work is involved going out onto farms and actually trialling these assessments. So from the frameworks, we've created a kind of assessment protocol with ticks and boxes that can then align to where each of those farms are meeting across the different criteria. So we're going across 50 sheep farms across Wales, across a variety of systems, in order to kind of look at roughly where people are in relation to the frameworks, but also to kind of continuously develop those and look at where it might practically not be so possible to assess on farm, or kind of how we can also incorporate things like outcome measures, as well as assessments of the environment. So looking at kind of the tree cover for farms as well. So it's a bit more of a kind of holistic approach than just the frameworks themselves, but those are being piloted at the moment, and will continue to be piloted for a few more months. So keep an eye out for any kind of communications, I guess, around the results of those. And then we've also created this self-assessment checklist, which I will come on to in a little bit. But essentially, what we're really keen to do is explore kind of how these frameworks can be used and should be used or will be used. So really interested, really having listened a little bit to what they are and some of the contents of the different opportunities. We're interested just to see what people think the best use of these frameworks will be. So we've got another poll, because we love a poll. That's the one, and I'll just quickly talk through some of these options, but and what we kind of mean by them, but also appreciate that not all of these options will be on there. So if you have anything to add, please do add it into the chat, and we'd be really, really interested in that. And I'm going to rattle through because we want to have some time for Q&A, but essentially we've had lots of discussion about independent audits versus self-assessments. We've thought about how they might be able to be used to facilitate payments for farmers who are potentially going above the basic, but also how can they maybe be used in order to signpost farmers in order to improve welfare on farm. So be that through better handling facilities and such too. We thought about how they might be used with vets, so that could be part of animal health plans. So for Wales, that'd be kind of the animal health improvement cycles that are developing and ongoing, or just general animal health planning with your vets. We've also thought about them as a resource and how they might be used to develop policy further or be used within assurance schemes and such. And then as a general discussion point as well for people to talk about positive welfare, potentially in groups for farmers. So, sorry, is the poll gone, or is that just because I can't see it now?
It's just at the moment it was set so you could only tick one thing, where we wanted people to be able to tick multiple. So I think Maddie's just doing some magical work to try and
work by Maddie to
launch it for everyone so that they can tick multiple boxes. So give her 1 second.
But if you have any other thoughts, then please do add them into the chat. Here it is. So yeah, maybe just your top 3, or I don't know, don't select them all is what I'm saying. Otherwise everyone will say 100% to everything. But just the key ones that potentially you could see this being a real benefit in kind of advancing welfare on farm via some of these methods. Yeah, a few more seconds. Great. So yeah, the self-assessment has come up nice and high, which is cool. We're going to talk about that in a sec. And then yeah, the part of the animal health improvement cycles or animal health planning and signposting farmers to payments is all quite well spread. Yeah, if anyone has any comments on the ways they think it shouldn't be used, then definitely do put that in the chat as well. Cool. I will skip on to the next slide. So this is just a bit of a kind of signpost really for people. So obviously Lizzie and Alison talked through some of the various opportunities, but what we've done is pulled this into a self-assessment. So you can see the questions by which people would be assessed against, much like they follow a similar format really to the ones that were on the screen earlier, but we focused on purely interest in a positively enriched environment and comfort in the environment for beef and sheep. And we've got this as a online form with the QR code will take you there, hopefully. Actually, I haven't tested it. Hopefully it does. If not, we've got a link which definitely takes you there, which I will pop in the chat now. And so then if you are happy, it'd be really great if you could fill that form in. It has options to say that you're filling it in for your own farm or for a farm that is, I've sent that to the wrong person, or for a farm that is like familiar to you. Either are really great, just so we can do a bit more of this kind of where do people sit across the different tiers. It also gives you an opportunity to see kind of detail, a bit more detail of the questions that we've got to so far. Brilliant. So I think if we move on to Q&A, I'm very aware of time because we've only got 8 minutes. Shall I start? If I start with one of the questions that was put in the chat earlier, and then anyone on the panel wants to jump in. So there was a question from Tony around whether there is any evidence that mob grazing causes or reduces stress.
I mean, I think from my point of view, others people can comment in, but I think a key aspect of the frameworks is to highlight the needs and desires of the animals regarding shade and shelter and space and choice. And I guess you could consider in certain mob grazing situations where they are quite confined and they may not have access to all of these different areas, it does highlight where there are, challenges in certain systems where you can't always meet all of their needs. But obviously it's about balance, because we know rotational grazing and mob grazing is obviously very valuable for pasture management and productivity and all of these things. So what we just need to focus on more is mob grazing is a really good opportunity, but we need to make sure that we can meet all of their other needs as well regarding shade and shelter and varied landscape where we can. But yeah, anyone else, have you got anything? Is there any? I know, Annie, obviously there's been work at FAI particularly around mob grazing. Is there behaviour stuff and welfare stuff picked up within that?
Yeah, so it's sat on the back of our pile, I guess, of things to do. And Amanda, who I think is also on the call, so we found increased synchronicity between the herds. So that was within a beef herd that we were assessing, and better handleability. So because they're being daily handled, we do find that they adapt to that management and showed kind of lower stress responses to people. But it was very much a pilot. I think there's definitely an area for more research to be done.
Yeah, agreed. And I think it basically highlights the need for balance to meet the needs of sort of productivity, soil health, but also the animals' needs as well. And I know
done as well.
Sorry.
You can have badly managed mob handling where it is probably stressful, where they're left potentially for too long without grass, or within areas where they don't have shade and shelter. But you can obviously have very, very good. So I guess extrapolating the variability within the systems is pretty difficult.
Indeed. And I know Leslie highlighted around sort of stock people, the people who are looking after these animals, and there being better ways to sort of monitor and assess them. And we do try and capture that to some extent within the confidence opportunity, positive experiences with stock keepers. And there are a selection of kind of areas within that regarding training and skills. And observational monitoring approaches that are sort of captured in there. But I think some of that does highlight also, whereas these opportunity frameworks obviously potentially go a really long way, but there is clearly lots of value in trying to line up outcome measures alongside it as well, so that you can see how animals respond to their to the people who are handling them, which we're looking at introducing as well as part of a bit of a toolbox of observational techniques that we'd love to sit alongside this. Great.
We have a question here from Manolo saying, do we have frameworks for livestock transportation?
No, is the short answer to that at the moment, unfortunately. So the frameworks at the moment very much sit with the animals' experience on farm. We're incredibly conscious that it's a big missing area around transport and slaughter, and also some of the very early life stuff in some of the species is captured better, depending on the species than others, particularly if, for example, in poultry, if you're moving from one farm to another, there's some more work to do then there. But yes, unfortunately at the moment transport and slaughter isn't captured, but we totally appreciate it's a very important area that needs to be next on the list to add in.
So Leslie put a comment in which I thought was quite interesting for people to discuss, and that was around it said one thing is that is missing in most welfare assessment tools is assessment of the person in charge. So much depends on the observational skills and understanding of what they are seeing. It needs assessing and help to improve if necessary. So does anyone have any comments?
Yeah, I think Kate
Lizzie, do you say?
Yeah, I think Kate kind of covered it earlier with the we try and capture that in the confidence, opportunity for confidence through relationship with stock keepers. And yes, we try and focus on, like you were saying, Leslie, the stock keepers are one of the most important aspects of animal welfare, and you were saying it depends on the observational skills and understanding of what they're seeing. So we try and cover that with through training and experience, because we also recognize that training is really, really important and helpful, and research has shown how beneficial it can be. So giving both in-person and online training on welfare outcome assessment is linked to then improved welfare on farm, where people are better able to understand what they're seeing and then put into practice things to improve welfare through what they're seeing. But also we recognise that experience is really important as well. So as well as kind of formal training, just having that long-standing experience with your animals and understanding what you're seeing. But yeah, it'll be really interesting to see once you receive the handbooks and you can see everything in more detail, whether you feel we cover that adequately or if things are still missing. So we definitely we'll welcome feedback from you all.
And one further area that it's covered is for each aspect of welfare. We're talking about comfort or pleasure or interest, etc. There is in each of those a criteria that the cattle or sheep are observed by the stock keeper and fed, and their management is adjusted to promote further things that they prefer within each aspect. So the idea of really focusing in on that aspect of welfare and providing as much of that as we possibly can, and according to the preferences of that particular bunch of animals in that particular farm, in that particular landscape, because you recognise all farms are different.
Absolutely, they certainly are. And what we'd really like to do with these frameworks is be able to capture the massive variation in what all the different farms are delivering, and obviously, as highlighted by some of the polls, enable farmers to shout about, be championed, celebrate the fact that they are going way over and above some, basic farm assurance standards or whatever in terms of delivering these positive welfare opportunities. So we see it as a real opportunity there. Brilliant. Right, I think we're at the end of our hour. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. I appreciate this is quite a taster session in terms of a little toe dip into the frameworks. And it's great to have so much interest, and as has been mentioned, we will share the handbooks. We just want to tinker with a couple of little revisions before we send them out more widely. I know obviously some people have had access, but we will just do a couple of revisions before we send them out more widely, but that will be very soon. if anyone is interested in being part of piloting, collaborating with groups of farmers they're working with, have a bit more of a chat about, how they think they might be able to implement the frameworks or apply them or anything, do reach out. You have my email there. We'll make sure I'll send a follow-up email with all the details afterwards. The more we can, talk about using these frameworks effectively for farmers, for animals, the better. So do get in touch. And I think lastly, we have a little survey just to give us any feedback on these sorts of webinars that we deliver. And they're always very valuable to have that information. So I shall close with saying thank you ever so much to all the lovely team of us that have been talking to you today. Thank you very much for joining us. As I say, we're moving on. We've got dairy and laying hens just ready to go into the handbook format, and we're doing pilots on them in the new year. So any people out there, any farmers who are dairy and laying hens want to be part of pilots, do shout. And then we're moving on to pigs and meat chickens next year. So a little bit more time till we get to them. But otherwise, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.